Prime Minister calls general election out in the rain. Classic element of modern real-life British political comedy. Now comes the part where we throw our heads back and laugh. Ready?
Ready!
And as Big Ben strikes 10, the exit poll is predicting a Labour landslide.
Thank you so much for that reception. What an amazing reception. We did it! You campaigned for it, you fought for it, you voted for it, and now it has arrived. Change begins now.
To the country, I would like to say first and foremost, I am sorry. I have given this job my all, but you have sent a clear signal that the government of the United Kingdom must change, and yours is the only judgment that matters. I have heard your anger, your disappointment, and I take responsibility for this loss.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today. Thank you very much.
Hello there, Richard the Film Geek here, and I'm here to give you guys a different type of rant this time round, where I'm going to give you guys my analysis and reaction to the outcome of the 2024 UK general election, which took place just over a week ago on Thursday the 4th of July, and saw the historic rise to power as widely predicted in the national polls, with a landslide 412-seat majority of the Labour Party for the first time since Tony Blair's landmark landslide election victory in 1997 under current Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, as well as the equally historic tragicomic downfall of ex-Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and the Conservative Party, after 14 years with one of, if not their absolute worst electoral defeat in close to 100 years, with only 121 seats. Bearing in mind, this is coming from someone who's really a novice when it comes to world politics in general, and not just here in the UK. And I do sincerely apologise if I ever come across as a bit inexperienced, all over the place, and out of my depth in terms of the specifics of this subject. I just wanted to very briefly give you guys my personal 2 cents on the subject as I can, and then move on. However, there is the slightest of possibilities that I might make an impromptu comeback to talking about said subject later on in the year if, and this is a big if, a certain proven convicted felon somehow gets re-elected as President of the United States. With all that said and prefaced, here are my thoughts on the 2024 UK general election. The only perfect way I can possibly begin to describe and summarise all 6 weeks of this year's election is literally like watching a hilariously bad episode of Hell's Kitchen or even The Apprentice, where both teams make fuck up after fuck up after fuck up, but the losing team just cannot help but trip up even more and make even more fuck-ups than the other team that you just cannot help but laugh, cringe, wince, cry, or even do all 4 of these things at the same time. And I bring up this little reality TV related analogy because from sad and miserable start to even sadder and more miserable finish, the Tory party's entire campaign this year, as well as it ultimately being the messy culmination of 14 chaotic and dysfunctional years, consisting of 7 chancellors of the exchequer, 8 foreign secretaries, 8 home secretaries, 8 health secretaries, 13 culture secretaries, and of course 5 consecutive Tory prime ministers, namely David Cameron, the pig-shagging Colin Firth lookalike, Theresa May, the robotic dancing queen, Boris Johnson, the dangerously narcissistic clown, Liz Truss, the rotten lettuce, and Rishi Sunak, the Asian Mr. Bean. Self-implosion, infighting, institutional incompetence, austerity, authoritarian and ideology-driven approaches to both legal and illegal immigration, constant broken promises, Brexit, public morale in British politics gone rock bottom, the second most disastrous response in the Western world to COVID behind the United States, Partygate, COVID contracts, a mini-budget that crashed and nearly bankrupted the economy shortly after the Queen's death, and their abject failure to tackle cost of living, housing, education, prisons, climate change, our responses to international conflict, i.e. the wars in Ukraine and Gaza, the post office scandal, countless strikes, a homelessness epidemic, a mental and physical health epidemic, especially amongst young people, crime gone through the roof, spiralling inflation, and an NHS that's effectively been kneecapped has been nothing less than an absolute tragicomic disaster of epic proportions. But he has also unironically provided all of us with some of the best, most cathartic and extremely satisfying modern real-life British political comedy we've ever had to witness in real time so far this year. In fact, I might even go as far to say that this is probably going to go down in the history books as one of, if not the most extraordinary general election campaign I've ever had to witness so far in my lifetime. Seriously, everything that could literally possibly go wrong for Rishi Sunak during this election campaign indeed went epically, shambolically, and hilariously wrong. From his calling the election outside number 10 in the pouring rain, with the New Labour 97 anthem, Things Can Only Get Better, audibly playing in the background, and almost drowning out what he was saying.
Earlier today, I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament. The King has granted this request, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
To his making scatterbrained election pledges in a desperate but failed attempt to improve his and the party's chances in the polls, such as more tax cuts, a raising of the tax-free state pension allowance via a triple lot plus, successful implementation of the Rwanda immigration scheme if re-elected, and chiefly the reintroduction of national service.
Britain today faces a future that is more dangerous and more divided. There's no doubt our democratic values are under threat. That is why we will introduce a bold new model of national service for 18-year-olds.
You serious?
You are on meth!
You've seen that again over the past few days. The desperation of this national service policy, a sort of teenage dad's army, paid for, I kid you not, by cancelling levelling up funding and money from tax avoidance that we would use to invest in our NHS.
This is a generation who lost years, the best years of their life. They were banned from going to parties by people who then had a series of illicit parties themselves. Absolutely. In the heart of government. These are people who now can't afford to rent because it's too expensive. They can't afford to buy a home. They can't afford to buy food. They can't even afford to go to the pub. They face punitive tuition fees for decades if they get to higher education. They probably won't ever earn as much money as their parents. They can't see doctors. They can't see dentists. They can't go to A&E without a 15-hour wait. They can't even go to the sea and have a swim without being covered in sewage. And this is what we've given this generation. So when we talk about national service and them doing their duty to their country, why don't we start with a bit of service to them and showing them a bit of duty to safeguard their future?
to his not taking seriously the threat of Nigel Farage's shock entry into the race as the Reform UK Nazi party leader.
So I have decided, I've changed my mind. It's allowed, you know. It's not always a sign of weakness. It could potentially be a sign of strength. So I am going to stand in this election. I'll be launching my candidacy at midday tomorrow in the Essex seaside town of Clacton. So midday tomorrow, Clacton, at the end of the pier. Richard is more than happy for me to put my head and shoulders firmly over the parapet and take the flak. So I'm coming back as leader of Reform UK, but not just for this election campaign. I'm coming back for the next 5 years. And there is one very simple reason for that. We all know already that the Conservative Party will be in opposition, but it won't be the opposition. They are incapable of it. They've spent most of the last 5 years fighting each other rather than standing up and fighting for the interests of this country. They are split down the middle on policy, and frankly right now, they don't stand for a damn thing. Because they're still pumping out the same line, that if you vote for reform, you will get Labour. But the inflection point means that actually, if you vote Conservative in the red wall, you will almost certainly get Labour. A Conservative vote in the red wall is now a wasted vote. We are the challengers to Labour. We are now the real opposition.
To allegedly lying about a planned £2,000 tax rise concerning Labour during his first televised head-to-head debate with Starmer.
Keir Starmer would put all that progress at risk. He would put up everyone's taxes by £2,000. £2,000 in higher taxes for every working family in our country after all the hard work and sacrifice we've been through. That's not the right course of action. I don't know why you want to put up people's taxes.
Keir Starmer.
Paul, I just don't know how you feel when you hear a Prime Minister say, having heard what you're going through, that the plan is working, it's all right. I meet so many people who are struggling with their bills, and the Prime Minister just keeps saying he lives in a different world, that
Could you,
the corner's turned and it's all
if people
right.
are struggling with their bills, why do you want to make it harder for them by saddling them with £2,000 worth of higher taxes? How is that going to make Paula or anyone's life easier?
Could you respond directly to Rishi Sunak?
This is the Prime Minister who's been part of a government that has put up tax 26 times. The last manifesto that they had in 2019 said we won't put up national insurance. This man then put up national insurance. He's the British expert on tax rises. They're at the highest level for 70 years. And he's got the gall to say other people are going to...
I know you're going to hear a lot about the past in this election, but this election is about the future. This election is about the future, and I'm clear that I'm going to keep cutting people's taxes, as we now are.
Can we just,
you want to put everyone's taxes up by £2,000, and this is really important. Independent Treasury officials have costed Labour's policies, and they amount to a £2,000 tax rise for every working family. No, this is important. Mark my words. Labour will raise your taxes. It's in their DNA. Your work, your car, your pension.
Thank you. OK,
you name it, Labour will tax it.
He's an asshole.
To his disgraceful early snubbing of the D-Day commemorations to do an interview for the ITV Tonight programme with Paul Brandt, where he then sets himself up for further media ridicule with the Sky TV sob story.
Prime Minister.
Gosh, hello. Sorry to
I'm
have
well,
kept
thanks you. No, not at all. I know you've been in Normandy.
Yeah, it all just ran over. It was incredible, but it just ran over everything.
I'm sure it was
So apologies for keeping you.
No, not at all. I'm sure it was a powerful trip.
That was a mistake, and I apologise.
When you are wealthier than the king, what do you do day to day to make sure you're still in touch with the kind of struggles ordinary people face? Have you ever gone without something?
Yeah, I mean, my family emigrated here with very little. And that's how I was raised. I was raised with the values of hard work.
What did you go without as a child?
We went out with lots of things, right? Because my parents wanted to put everything into our education, and that was a priority.
So what sort of things had to be sacrificed?
Lots of things, right?
Can you give me an example
all
of
sorts of things. So, like lots of people, there'll be all sorts of things that I would have wanted as a kid that I couldn't have, right? Famously, Sky TV.
Okay.
So that was something that we never had growing up, actually.
If you listen to people in the audience across the country more often, you might not be quite so out of touch.
To his delusional, even more out of touch claims to Laura Kuenssberg that the UK is a much better place to live in now than it was in 2010.
Your party has run this country for a generation, and over that time, people's livelihoods have become less secure. There is less faith in our public services, and many people feel that our standing in the world has also been at question. Is this a better or a worse place to live than in 2010?
No, it's a better place to live than it was in 2010. Of course, I understand that the last few years have been difficult for everyone. We had a once-in-a-century pandemic, followed by a war in Ukraine that drove up everyone's bills, and of course that's been difficult for everybody. But we've also made progress in tackling those things. Inflation back to normal, the economy growing again, wages rising, energy bills set to fall again just next week. And now we're able to start cutting people's taxes to give them financial security. So yes, of course it's been difficult, but we are now on the right track with the prospect of more tax cuts to come to give people more financial security. And that's the key choice for people at this election, building on the progress that we've made.
If you listen to people in the audience across the country more often, you might not be quite so out of touch.
To his egregious mishandling of the LGBTQ debacle concerning his own openly transphobic former Equalities Minister, Keir Badenoch, and Doctor Who legend David Tennant, which is actually especially rich coming from someone who said this.
I think I counted almost 30 in the last year. Pensions, planning, peerages, public sector pay, tuition fees, childcare, second referendums, defining a woman. Although in fairness, that was only 99% of a U-turn.
You end up with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom standing in Parliament making an anti-trans joke in front of the mother of a murdered trans teenager. I will never, ever allow myself to be put into that position.
Rishi Sunak,
Okay.
would you like to
To even his own campaign officials and director being embroiled in an illegal betting stroke gambling scandal concerning the election day.
Allegations that some of those closest to number 10 placed bets on the timing of the election had left Rishi Sunak, as he put it, incredibly angry. He said that again and again today. But pushed to suspend the prospective MPs, now under official investigation by the Gambling Commission, there was no committal, and he refused to be drawn on whether he knows of any other candidates or officials caught up in the scandal. Labour accused Mr Sunak of a total lack of leadership. He certainly has a total lack of campaign director after Tony Lee took leave of absence yesterday. It is all terrible timing, with Gamblegate, it is as it's now being called, overshadowing the PM's other campaigning.
I was incredibly angry when I learned about these allegations, in the same anger that many of you will feel and everyone watching. And it's right that they are investigated thoroughly. These are serious allegations.
So far, there are 4 people in the Prime Minister's circle under investigation for allegedly placing bets on the date of the election. His parliamentary private secretary, Craig Williams, a close aide, has admitted he did. His campaign's director, Tony Lee, is being looked into, as is his wife, Laura Saunders, a candidate in Bristol. And one of the Prime Minister's close protection officers has been arrested and suspended by the Met.
I hope you can appreciate there's not much more I can add. There is a limit to what can happen during those investigations to protect the integrity of them. There's not much more I can add to what I said previously.
For a man who came to power promising this.
This government will have integrity, professionalism, and accountability at every level.
He's under pressure to justify why he hasn't suspended those allegedly involved.
The Prime Minister is showing a total lack of leadership on this. Let's look at what actually happened. In relation to a general election, the instinct of these Tories, when the general election is called, is not how do we make this work for the country, but how do I make some money?
It's not just about the gambling, it's about everything else that goes back to PPE procurement, it goes to partying during lockdown. There's been so much of it.
Have you heard about the gambling allegations recently?
Yes.
Has that had any impact on what you think of them?
Corrupt. I think it just proves again that they're very corrupt, personally. That's my opinion.
I think it's just more fuel to the fire, really, isn't it? You know, I think it's... but no, I wasn't surprised at all.
I mean, heck, Labour admittedly didn't exactly have a perfect campaign either. Keir Starmer has clearly proven himself to not really be that good when it comes to doing televised debates, and maybe perhaps wasn't entirely as honest or transparent as he needed to be at times. And of course the Labour campaign wasn't without its fair share of slight imperfections and gaffes. Diane Abbott.
The whip has been restored to Diane Abbott, as you know, so she is a member of the Parliamentary Labour Party, and no decision has been taken to bar her going forward.
But I would actually make the argument that Labour didn't really need to do much of anything in order to win the landslide majority that they very much deservedly got, because the Tories ran such an incredibly awful and piss-poor campaign. They dismally failed to improve their consistent tanking performance in the opinion polls. Public distrust in their party was at an all-time high. And more or less, they technically already conceded anyway that they were ultimately going to lose to Labour. So they basically said, fuck it, threw in the towel, sold their reputation and traditional core values down the river, and just willingly fell into Labour's hands. Plus the fact that we all just got sick and tired to the back teeth of all the chaos and all the madness, and very much similarly to how Joe Biden was elected president in 2020, for example, after 4 horrendous years of Donald Trump in the White House. It was about time that we needed an actual grown-up in charge who was actually going to clean up the mess the Tories have left behind and actually get on with the job of running the country. Someone who felt like a breath of fresh air, was positively boring and uncharismatic, and someone who puts the interests of the country before himself. And luckily, so far into his premiership, that's exactly what Keir Starmer is providing us with at long last for the first time in 14 years.
200,000 dead. As you said, over 7 million infected in the United States. We, in fact, have 4% of the world's population, 20% of the deaths. 40,000 people a day are contracting COVID. In addition to that, about between 750 and 1,000 people a day are dying. When he was presented with that number, he said, it is what it is. Well, it is what it is because you are who you are. That's why it is. The president has no plan. He hasn't laid out anything. He knew all the way back in February how serious this crisis was. He knew it was a deadly disease. What did he do? He's on tape as acknowledging he knew it. He said he didn't tell us or give people a warning of it because he didn't want to panic the American people. You don't panic. He panicked. In addition to that, what did he do? He went in and we were insisting that the people we had on the ground in China should be able to go to Wuhan and determine for themselves how dangerous this was. He did not even ask Xi to do that. He told us what a great job Xi was doing. He said we owe him a debt of gratitude for being so transparent with us. And what did he do then? He then did nothing. He waited and waited and waited. He still doesn't have a plan. I laid out back in March exactly what we should be doing. And I laid out again in July what we should be doing. We should be providing all the protective gear possible. We should be providing the money the House has passed in order to be able to go out and get people the help they need to keep their businesses open schools that cost a lot of money. You should get out of your bunker and get out of the sand trap and get in your golf course and go in the Oval Office and bring together the Democrats and Republicans and fund what needs to be done now to save lives.
I'm not going to pretend that Ukraine and COVID hasn't made things worse, but this government has lost control. Liz Truss crashed the economy. They made it worse here than in other countries, and it's people like you that are paying the price, because if a government loses control of the economy, as they have, it's working people that pay the price. And Liz Truss's advisers are in the House of Lords. She's going to be a candidate at the next election. Rishi Sunak is putting her forward. We've got to stop this chaos, got to stop the division, turn a page and start to rebuild under Labour.
You're probably asking one of three questions. Where the hell did it all go catastrophically wrong for Rishi Sunak and the Tories during this campaign? Why would Sunak make a massive gamble with the country he ultimately knew he was going to lose and call the election the way he did in the first place without any real sense of a game plan in sight whatsoever? And was Sunak ever really that good of a prime minister to begin with? Well, other than point out the fact that the guy looks like he would be absolute pitch perfect casting as the hilariously incompetent villain in a live-action Wallace and Gromit movie, I can only collectively answer all three of these questions by giving out only 6 speculative theories, some of which people might have already guessed. The first theory being that something inside Sunak's brain momentarily snapped the day he lost his first Conservative Party leadership contest to Liz Truss, and that he likely never recovered from that, or had at least enough of the experience to competently and or maturely handle that initial rejection. The second theory is that Sunak basically became like Gollum with the ring, or Cruella de Vil with Dalmatian fur, or even the Daleks with extermination. Sunak became so obsessed and fixated with the Rwanda immigration scheme that it completely clouded and corrupted his judgment to such an extent that the moment the UK Supreme Court deemed the scheme to be unlawful was clearly where he effectively gaslit himself, lost track of his senses, threw his toys out of the pram, and, well, basically said this.
No one asked your opinion, you filthy little mudblood.
He just became so arrogant and determined to forcefully plough the scheme through the courts anyway, even if it risked the UK potentially exiting from the ECHR. The third and probably the most glaringly obvious theory is that Sunak himself was just a shit campaigner. He acted like a frightened rabbit in the headlights most of the time. He was completely in self-denial and/or lacked any self-awareness. He lost complete control of the sinking Tory ship. He clearly didn't know what the hell he was doing, and he was just incredibly unlucky to find himself in an utter mess of his own making. The fourth and probably the most out there theory is that whoever the hell was on Sunak's PR spin team advising him throughout the campaign either were really shit at their jobs and normally would have been fired on the spot but weren't, or just hated the guts of this man so much that they did a fantastically deliberate undercover job of sabotaging him with every chance they had. The fifth and probably the other glaringly obvious theory is that Sunak just ultimately became the unfortunate victim of 14 years of failure, hubris, and steep decline from an institutionally corrupted Tory party completely mired in a culture of its own making, of incompetence, hypocrisy, lies, sleaze, and scandal that has ended up consuming their reputation and completely colouring the universally negative public perception of them throughout the country, and has basically literally helped to transform the Tories into the British version of the modern American GOP Republican Party. And the final and probably the most plausible theory is the idea that with someone like Rishi Sunak, behind the false smiles, the false bravado, and the repeated mantras of Labour don't have a plan, you are directly looking into the sad, tired eyes of a man who was already done, resigned to his fate, stopped caring, given up the fight, clearly didn't really want to be where he was anymore, knew that the writing was already on the wall, knew that his downfall was inevitable at this point, and was absolutely begging at the end of the day to be put out of his misery by the electorate and voted out of office so that he can lead the Tories to the demise they very richly deserved, leave 10 Downing Street with his head held high, and enjoy a blissful early retirement with his wife, kids, and stinking wealth in sunny California. Now that the dust has settled, the election is long over, the new Labour government seeming to show immediate positive signs, at least so far, that everything is slowly returning to normal, and the Tories still seeming to have not learned their lesson and continuing to fight amongst themselves instead of what they should be doing, which is taking an extended period of time to reflect on why they lost and how best to reinvent themselves. The question remains, what exactly does the future hold for the UK for the next 5 years? My honest answer to this question, for right now, I am cautiously optimistic, but in the long run, I genuinely don't know. Even though I am obviously insanely uncomfortable with Nigel Farage being one potential step away from becoming the next Prime Minister in 2029, it is still only perfectly fair, at least in my view, that we should continue to give this new government a chance to prove to us within their first 100 days in power why a large majority of us in our droves voted for them. If they continue to do the decent, competent job they're clearly already doing at the moment of fixing up the ginormous mess they've inherited and tackling some of the real societal problems facing this country right now, as well as standing up to major international threats such as Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un, Hamas/Netanyahu, and especially Putin and potentially Trump, then fan-freaking-tastic. However, if they take advantage of their majority, do a really crap job in one or all three of these areas, and or put a single foot wrong somewhere down the line, then like with any other government that comes into power, we must not be afraid to scrutinise and call them out for their failures, as well as hold them to account accordingly. But then again, as they say, only time will tell. And that's really all I have left to say about this topic. So don't forget to be polite and civil in this case whilst doing the following few things. Leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts on the 2024 UK general election. Feel free to like and share the video if you so wish. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel as always. Click on the little bell so that you get all of the notifications and updates associated with the channel via email. Follow me on Instagram and Letterboxd if you haven't already. Do take care, everyone, and things can only get better. Can only get better.